Well, it's time for our Wimbledon show, our fifth edition, talking tennis in the lead up to a major with Steve Quick from Ace Previews, who has been in Europe for the last little while, was in Europe for the French Open and making his way back home slightly or slowly but surely in the lead up to Wimbledon. Steve, nice to have you with us. Can you sort of take us through what the perspective has been like taking in tennis in Europe during the European swing?
Yeah, look, thanks for having me. It's been a nice change, having tennis on during the day for the last. I've been kind of in Europe for about 6 weeks. Just got back to Singapore now, so it's been. I mean, I spent the majority of the time. I said, people were seeing. I was at the Geneva Open, which was fantastic in terms of access and just the ability to kind of get up close to the action was awesome. Something a bit different, obviously, with the clay as well. Don't get to see that really in on Australian soil. But look, the majority of the time traveling the last couple of weeks has been through Italy. So it's been interesting. I think the biggest takeaway for me has been how obviously Yannick Sinner's been the big story through Italy, and how you can kind of turn on the news and there will be kind of the top story. The ticker tape down the bottom will be Sinner wins round two match in three sets. And there's actually kind of genuine care and interest about just a general kind of ATP 500, as the main story. But he seems to have been popping up everywhere in ads here, there, and everywhere, and even Paolini as well at Roland Garros. But yeah, look, it's been nice to have tennis on during the day and not have to be up overnight to catch some live tennis. So really, really enjoyed it. But yeah, looking forward to getting back to Melbourne and getting stuck into what looks like it's going to be an interesting fortnight for Wimbledon.
Yeah, I remember being in the US a couple of years ago and watching English Premier League matches at 10 o'clock in the morning and stuff like that, thinking that's a lot more pleasant. But so no Nadal, no Federer, no Murray for this Wimbledon campaign. We're not 100% certain on Novak yet. He's training, so promising signs, but it's not inconceivable that we have a Wimbledon campaign without all four of those, and that'll be the subject of a topic we do a little bit later on. But what have you made of the lead up for Yannick Sinner won the Harley tournament, which Roger Federer used to own? Tommy Paul winning Queens. Alex de Minaur's had some really good lead up form as well. How have you seen it on the men's side?
Yeah, I think, as I said, those four names, and look, if Novak does get up, it will be, I mean, it's a fascinating watch. And I think it makes it obviously a bit tricky for us because we haven't seen him on court. I think Tanazi Kokonakis may have posted the other day that playing on grass is a walking MCL sprain waiting to happen. It's going to be a tricky one for him to come back to. But I think, we talked a little bit before Roland Garros about the opportunity that presented for a lot of players in terms of being able to kind of get over the hump there. We've got the same thing here. Again, I think, we're starting to see, as you said, those big names of yesteryear now, we have to call them. They're not there to command finals appearances or titles. And yeah, particularly with the question mark around Novak, is it Alcaraz, is it Sinner, or is it someone else who's going to pop up? But as you said, Tommy Paul, Alex de Minaur, there's been a couple of interesting ones, Jack Draper as well. They've certainly put their hand up, but it's a matter of who's going to be able to get over the line with those 7 best-of-5 set wins over the next fortnight.
Women's lead up, Alia Tomljanovic made a final, if I'm not mistaken. Eastbourne going on currently. What have you made of the some of the lead up stuff for the women, Birmingham and the like?
Yeah, I think it's presenting again as a really open tournament. Obviously we had Roland Garros and we had Iga at the top of the market. It was a very, very short price, except for what was it, probably the 45 minutes where she was on the brink against Naomi Osaka early in the tournament. But again, we've got injuries and question marks at the top of the market. The likes of Sabalenka, Rybakina, where it's looking at the quality and looking at the quality of Iga in particular. I guess you think about how well she can play at 3 Grand Slams in particular across the course of the year. Generally, this is the one that's probably most accessible to a lot of the other players. We saw Vondrousova obviously last year be able to kind of come from nowhere and snatch that title. It'll be interesting again to see if we can get someone of that kind of ilk, making a bit of a run here with some of those question marks around the top players.
And we'll look at that market. I mean, Iga, to give that away too much, but $1.90 before the French Open, $5 before Wimbledon, which gives you the indication. Still favourite, but as you say, clearly more gettable. That men's market, as we look at that, Sinner 288, Alcaraz 345. Alcaraz beating Sinner in that cliffhanger French Open semi. He's now won 3 majors. Alcaraz, I think the youngest person to win on all 3 surfaces, has won this title obviously 12 months ago. Djokovic 550, which is a big ask. I'd hazard a guess without having every single market in front of me that would have to be his longest price at Wimbledon in 12 years or more, to be 550. And then you look at the next line, which would be Zverev, Hurkacz, Demon, Medvedev, who should be a very good player on grass. Hasn't always been his best slam, but he should go all right on it. What do you make of the men's market?
Yeah, I think it's fair to have Jannik Sinner as the favourite here. I think, looking at what he's been able to produce, and yes, he did lose that semi-final at Roland Garros, but his consistency across the course of the season has stood out far and above the rest of the pack. Alcaraz is obviously that next one who, has had some injury issues and has been a little bit up and down. Obviously was, able to get the Roland Garros title. I think, yeah, from those two, yeah, Sinner deserves to be that little bit ahead. Novak throws up the unknown here. If he looks fantastic, it's hard to know because we don't know, obviously, the extent of the knee injury that then led to the surgery as to, gradings and things of that nature. So, obviously he's been playing, some practice sets and been on court over the course of the last couple of days. So be interesting to see how he looks, I think, in the first round or two in particular. But yeah, looking down to the others, it's trying to find those players. I think that you will find them serving and holding serve comfortably, throughout the course of the fortnight. You mentioned Hurkacz. I think he's one to keep an eye on. Medvedev looked a little better on the grass last year. Didn't look fantastic, I guess, early days, in this grass swing. I think he's an interesting price, and you just wonder. I guess every time I look at Medvedev, I just feel like he's going to make a mess of something in the first week. And you just wonder if he's just going to kind of take the scenic route and then find his way to kind of a quarterfinal and lose to a more proficient, grass court player. I think the 2 players below that, that probably stand out the most to me. You mentioned Alex de Minaur, and the other one is Jack Draper. Spoke about those 2 on the hub last week. Just in the lead up in terms of, they've both looked really good on the grass and they look really, really capable. Draper has some question marks around his fitness around best of 5. But I think looking at Alex de Minaur, and we might talk about him a little bit more later, I think this is a really great opportunity for him.
Yeah, definitely. Mention that women's side of the draw. Swiatek's still favourite, but 2.5 times the price that she was in Paris for obvious reasons. Sabalenka $5. Rybakina has won this title before, but has had, illness and injury issues on and off for a while. And then Goff, 940. Those 4 are usually the ones that are in single figures at every major at the moment. But there does appear to be some dark horses. Osaka obviously nearly beat Swiatek in Paris, as we mentioned, and Raducanu's looked okay. Mukova fit again, seemingly. What do you make of the pack behind that top echelon as well?
Yeah, I think Mukova, I would have loved to have seen a little bit more form coming in. Obviously, only played a handful of matches. Has looked good, but just hasn't played tennis, over the last couple of months. So it's hard to gauge thinking then about a full fortnight of Grand Slam level tennis. Raducanu, you mentioned, I think she has looked. I think it's the most comfortable she's looked on court for quite some time. Obviously, we'll have the home crowd as well. That's going to be a big factor, and we know that she can. She's not overawed by the occasion. She's won a Grand Slam. She won, the US Open arguably ahead of her time with one of the most dominant fortnights of tennis that we've seen from a player, particularly of her age and ranking at the time. So she's one I think to keep an eye on. Outside of that pack at the top, I mean, maybe it's Coco Gauff. It's going to probably depend a little bit on the draw of these players, but yeah, it's a tough ask. You mentioned Osaka. Her first serves look good. If she can consistently find that first serve at a high rate, then she becomes a threat. But it's really going to be, I think, a bit of a toss up through that kind of 4th through almost 16th in the market at the moment, looking on the exchange.
Yeah, there's certainly a bit of value there and some prices. Now, looking at some little education opportunities for those punters on the exchange to get a bit of a reasoning behind some stuff. For about a week or so, as you mentioned, your trading strategies have been up for Alex de Minaur and Jack Draper, who represent a bit of value. Can you sort of take us through the decision making in those trading options? Because that's not necessarily, hey, I'm going to put my hand up now and say they'll win Wimbledon. It's those opportunities to trade them in, trade them out, that type of thing.
Yeah, so looking at those two in particular, obviously both had really strong weeks the week before on the grass, but there wasn't a significant shift. I think looking at their outright prices on the exchange in terms of Wimbledon, they did come in a little bit, but I was probably expecting them to come in maybe a little bit more. If we have a look at Jack Draper in the first instance, so comes in off that title, I think was it beat Berrettini, I think
Yep.
it was in the
Yep.
final from a set down. Things that we're probably not used to seeing from Draper in terms of that kind of digging in adversity late in the third set, looking the better player. Um, Obviously has looked good on the grass in the past. I think back to, was that a couple of years ago? I think he was really challenging de Minaur in a particular match and just ran out of fumes. We've seen him at Grand Slam level a couple of times. I think it was against Nadal a couple of years ago at the Oz Open. It was almost arguably in control of the match, and then his body started to fail him. I think if things can click for him, I think it'll work really well for his game to be able to make a run to the second week here now that he's a seeded player. He's not going to have to worry about playing a top player in the first, round or two. And I thought coming off the title the week before, you can generally forgive a player kind of backing up. They've had arguably the biggest week of their career. They come into the next tournament that they might be a little bit underdone. He was facing Carlos Alcaraz the next day. And I just felt that if Draper lost that match, I felt like there would be excuses for it. I think you could kind of give him a pass for that. But I thought if he could kind of come in and then win that as well, that we'd see a significant jump, I think, in his price just to be able to trade. And that was certainly the case. He was able to beat Alcaraz in straight sets in the end. I think jumped from 60s into about 24, 26 in the market there. So a nice price there. And obviously, with the solid form has come in the rankings and seedings as well. And de Minaur, to use that point again, I think it just lost to Mazzetti after coming off a title the week before. Won another title at the same time as his girlfriend, Katie Bolter. So I thought that was probably a little bit of a letdown spot there, but I was happy to forgive him for that loss. And I think when you look at de Minaur, yes, he doesn't have the serve of a lot of the top players, but I think he's least vulnerable when it comes to the grass because he's got that kind of all court game. He can stay on the baseline. He can play low bouncing balls relatively well. He can take the ball early. He doesn't have to feel like he's having to kind of step back and run and defend in the same way maybe as on the other surfaces. So I felt like they were the two, particularly with those question marks around Novak as well and his injury, that they were the two from a trading selection that appealed those couple of weeks out from the tournament.
And got those write-ups online as well. Blind ranking time, which we've done
Yep.
the last couple of programs. Got two topics. Do you want to run through the first one? Obviously, we usually look at the women's draw and the men's draw. We'll start off with the women's. What are we looking at here? This can obviously land us in a sticky spot sometimes.
Right. So you did this to me for Roland Garros,
Fair.
and now I'm returning the favor. Um, so we'll start with the women's.
Hmm.
So top five. So these are women's winners from the last 25 years of Wimbledon. So
Right.
going back to 1999.
Hmm.
I will give you the disclaimer that I have not included Serena or Venus Williams.
How many of those did they win? 11 or something?
Yeah,
Maybe
that's double
more.
figures.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've taken them out because
Right.
I didn't want to stitch you up by putting them last.
Right.
All right. So first up, we have Amelie Mauresmo.
Four.
Yep. Elena Rybakina.
Hmm. I'm gonna go in a potential base decision. Three.
3. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Mm.
Next up, we have Angelique Kerber.
She had a very good run for a couple of years there. Won three majors. Was a big disruptor in that group. Given no Serena or Venus, I'm going to be bold enough to say two.
Two. All right. Lindsay Davenport.
Stick my neck out and say Lindsay will be one. Spent number one, was number one in the world for a long time. Had a very good record at Australia as well. So might have egg on my face because all I've got left is five, but I've got
Yep.
Lindsay at one.
Yeah. And the last one is actually been in the news the last 24 hours or so. Garbine Muguruza.
Yeah, I mean, I was there when she made the final and lost to Serena in 2015, and probably similar to Kerber in that she had a good run for a little while, but it put her in there at five without probably without embarrassing myself too greatly.
I think, yeah, I think you'd be pretty comfortable with that top five. Now, if
Now
I did
men's
that,
is
if
different.
I
Yes, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
if I
How
did
would you
that
have
for the
done it?
men's,
Yep,
oh, so actually, for that five for the women's,
yep,
uh, I would have had the same. I
yep.
think.
Okay,
Um,
well, that's
I think
pleasing.
it's yeah, and look, we're going against recency bias as well, having Lindsay Davenport at 1, 2 from that list.
Yeah.
Now if I did this for the men's, I'd be a bit stuck because there's a lot of Federer, Djokovic, Murray, and Nadal.
Well, in the last
But
21 years, there have only been five winners, and four of them for 20 years of that stretch. So Alcaraz was the
yeah,
fifth winner in the last 22 years. Yeah.
yeah. So I've gone a little bit differently here.
hmm
So these are top five, and they're
hmm
men's finalists that faced the big four and lost.
Right. Okay, so we're going back to 2003 because they won every Wimbledon title between 2003 and 2022.
Yeah. All righty.
Okay.
So we'll go first up,
Uh-huh.
Nick Kyrgios.
Um, hmm. Potential would have him higher, but on output in his career, he probably has to go five.
Yep. Next up, we have Tomas Burdick.
One of that group in the Joe Wilfried song, David Ferrer era,
Career.
where you
Just
feel like,
the most unlucky
yeah,
period to be top level tennis player in the men's game.
100%. I'll put Burditch at three.
Mm-hmm. Mark Philippoussis.
Um, did make a second final and was a Davis Cup star, so I guess he edges Nick on that front into four.
4. Yeah. Okay. So you've got 1 and 2 left.
Yep.
Kevin Anderson.
That burns me a little bit. Obviously, he made a couple of Grand Slam finals. So at three, we had Thomas Burditch. At two, we have Kevin Anderson. It's probably not a horrific comparison. If I had my time again, I'd flip them. But Anderson at two.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think Anderson,
Hmm.
particularly late in his career, like that was it really, that last kind of 5 years in particular was he was banging the door down against some of those top names pretty consistently.
Yeah, and he was up two sets to love before a rain delay against Djokovic at Wimbledon 1 year as well, and then lost in five.
Yep. And that leaves lucky last, Andy Roddick.
I was banking on Andy being the fifth name there. And yeah, Grand Slam winner. Very unlucky not to have won Wimbledon. That 16-14 that he lost to Federer. So I'd put him
Yep.
in there as the best player of that list for mine.
Yep. All right.
So,
Yeah, look, I think I probably would have had maybe Anderson a bit lower out of
yep,
that bunch. But
yep.
I don't think you have egg on your face out of that. Hopefully, I didn't throw you under the bus there too
No,
much.
I think that's okay. The only revision I would have made maybe would have been just a Burditch Anderson switch.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's okay. That's much of a muchness. Last couple of segments before we wrap up. The Aussies, no Kyrgios again, as we mentioned. I don't think he's played since he made the final, or probably the US Open immediately after that. But Thompson, Popperin, O'Connell, Rinky, Purcell, Walton in behind De Minaur. Fascinating stuff in the qualies at the moment. Even on the girls' side, we had Preston, I think. $18 in the run against Destiny Iava and beat her. Then on the women's side, Saville, Alia Tomjanovic starting to build into some form. Any Aussies worth mentioning behind the Demon?
Can I start with the Demon first? Is that all right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, because we did talk about him a little bit in terms of from the trading perspective, but I do feel like this is the first time talking about him in the lead up to a Grand Slam. In the past, you've talked about him as a trading option, and then there's that potential of a trading option until he kind of gets to that quarterfinals kind of stage. But this feels like the first time that you can start to maybe think about him in the winners market in terms of going all the way through. And I think, he's shown that ability. I think he's going to be a really tough out across best of 5 on the grass over the course of the fortnight. Of the rest, Jordan Thompson has, how do I put it? I backed him a couple of weeks ago against Raonic when he started as a favorite, and he no-showed there, and then has pulled out some really impressive performances since. But I think there's a bit of a question mark, I think, around him and his fitness off that match with Mazzetti last week, which is a bit of a shame. I think it's a great opportunity for Popper and O'Connell, Hijikata. I don't think we're going to be talking about them in the outrights, late in week 2 or by any stretch. But I think they're capable. These are the type of tournaments where if they can get a favourable draw, get a kind of second, third, an ideal world, a 4th round, that's something that's going to really help their rankings, particularly the likes of O'Connell, Hijikata, even Max Purcell, those players who a lot of their ranking points have come from challenger type performances over the 12 months. If they can get some solid batch of points in a Grand Slam such as this one, I think it's a great opportunity. But I think outside of de Minaur, it's going to be tough to see any of them deep in the tournament. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, look, Jordan Thompson's had a couple of runs based on the draw where he's made 3rds and 4ths and things like that. O'Connell is solid enough if the draw's okay. Popper can be a frustrating player. He feels like he creates 35 break points a match, but just, he'll miss 6 break points and then get broken to love in his next game, that type of thing.
Yep.
So, look, he's always a chance to beat anyone, really. He's a dangerous prospect. And on the women's side, I think Saville will enjoy it a bit more. I think Alia will enjoy it a bit more, but, their preparations haven't been super, both coming off relatively long-term injuries. Saville's been back for a while, but hopefully building into that. Closing it out with betting strategies. Obviously, we don't have the draw in front of us just yet as they finalise qualies and everything, but any early thoughts?
So with the men's, so I'm happy to stick to de Minaur and Draper and continue through with those for now. We'll wait and see on the draw and maybe add a couple of selections there. Obviously, looking at the draw, you want to find yourself in the pockets or the quarters of the draw that don't involve Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz in a perfect world. And if you think that Novak is well below 100%, you probably want to find yourself in his kind of pocket of the draw if you can. I think they're probably the 2 for now, pre-draw. And on the women's, I think if I had to sit here and pick one player now pre-draw, given what we know about all the players and their form and fitness, it's probably Coco at the price. I think, she's sitting behind those top 3. Just looking at the market now, she's sitting around that $9.20. So I think, she's got all the tools to be a threat on the grass. I think she probably presents out of those top bunch. That would be the one I'd be going for. But it'll be an interesting draw here, I think, to see, can we find one of those players who can come in at a big price? We'll stay tuned. We'll look at the draw ceremony and the draws for both, and then add hopefully some winners up on the hub.
Yeah, Wimbledon hasn't been the haven for upsets in the men's, but it has been in the women's over the journey. So we'll see if some value pops up on that, and obviously a big chance for it on the men's side now with the big 4, that twilight period finally arriving, I guess, for those champions. But Steve, you'll be back in Oz soon, and we look forward to the daily previews throughout Wimbledon. Thanks for jumping on again.
No worries. Thanks for having me on, and looking forward to what should be a massive fortnight of tennis.
What's gambling really costing you? For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.